It's not a part of science. In science, again, we have to try to figure out what this thing that we call light is. What is the shape of light? And light is hopefully something and not a concept. I can stop light with my hand, and I talk about the speed of light. The speed of light means that something is moving. Hopefully it's not love, it's not intelligence that is moving there. Hopefully It's a physical object. That means light has to have shape. Now, this doesn't mean you're going to prove it. You're not going to verify what the shape of light is by throwing light at it like we do with a table. No, this is a conceptual issue. We have to figure out light obviously has a shape. And it's got to have some kind of shape no matter what. We can't say, well, we don't know. We got to look for the shape that explains observed phenomena. And it's a different way of looking at things. What people call philosophy is physics. And what people call physics, this mathematics, that is really philosophy because they're dealing with concepts. They're not dealing with objects. Specifically, physics is the science of existence. Physics only studies objects that exist.
Right. And what do you think changed in the, 4 centuries that you talk about that this mathematics work? And I mean, just from a complete layperson standpoint, I completely side with you in that some of this n-dimensional string theory stuff to me is, well, I remember reading about it over 20 years ago, and 20 years on, there still seems to be no definitive theory or test for any of this stuff. So it seems like a whole bunch of number crunching without any particular purpose. I say this as a complete amateur, so with all the caveats in the world. So I'm inclined to agree with you on this, which is probably why I shouldn't, because the inclining to agree is always a dangerous thing. But what do you think changed in the 400 years that mathematics became so primary in what used to be called physics?
I think what happened here was especially what I call 17th century version of science, or the scientific method. And that's when people came in with empiricism. They started saying that predictions, experiment, not assumption, but theorizing are all part of the hypothesis. And it's this enigmatic word hypothesis that I think has thrown people off. A hypothesis only includes the objects that are going to participate in the theory. It includes the definitions and the statements of the facts. Those are the 3 things that fall into hypothesis. A hypothesis is not a prediction. It's not an experiment. It's got nothing to do with theory. People think theory is just a more advanced stage of a hypothesis. This is absolutely nonsense. And so what has happened since the days of Newton is that people had initially, in those days, they were looking for what is light. People like Huygens and Robert Hooke, and later on Thomas Young and Augustin Fresnel. They were looking for what is light. What is this thing that is moving there? Why can I see? What is it? This thing that causes the slit experiment or the photoelectric effect. And about 100 years ago, a little less probably, we finally gave up. People say, well, Mother Nature has fooled us completely. We don't know what it is, so we're going to simulate this with particles for most of what we have to do, and whenever we can't do it with particles, we'll just invent the wave and use the wave, then go back to particles. So today you have the standard model of quantum mechanics, which is a particle model. But ask any mathematician to draw a single one of those particles, and they can't do it because they don't know what it looks like. They'll tell you a proton is a particle. They'll tell you an electron is a particle. These are big particles now. We're not talking about photons here. We're talking about much bigger particles, and they can't draw a single one. But they tell you that they're smashing them at CERN and at SLAC every day and producing more particles with them. Well, what does this big particle look like? I mean, I put this analogy. You know that the nails, you talk about the nails of your house holding up the wood, the wooden boards of your house, but you can't tell me what your house looks like. You talk about gluons holding the nucleus of the atom together, holding the quarks together, which make up a proton, which is inside of an atom, right? And we don't know what an atom looks like. No one can draw an atom for me after 100 years of quantum mechanics. Then how can this be a correct theory if we don't even know what an atom looks like? Especially when people claim, on the other hand, that they have filmed them, that they have made an image of an atom. So, we have images of an atom. We've seen them there, and we don't know what it looks like. No one can draw an atom for me. Whenever you go to any presentation, what you'll see the same thing. They will draw or they will use Bohr's planetary model. That's what we use to explain ionization. That's what we use to explain electricity. We take the electron bead and we make it go along the wire, and we say the electrons are flowing, and we'll call that electricity. So what does that mean? You're tacitly using the Bohr model, the Bohr planetary model of the atom. And again, it's because we have lost hope of figuring out what these invisible entities look like. We don't know what an atom looks like. We don't know what an electron looks like. We don't know what a photon looks like. We just use the particle model, and we say that it's the truth. We say that it's proof, and take it or leave it.
Right. I guess it's sort of like a workable metaphor rather than a specific identification of an object.
Yeah, and so what we have to do is define what an object is, what a concept is. When a mathematician tells me that an electron is a zero-dimensional particle, then I have a problem with that because he's talking about a concept, he's not talking about an object. And he might say that, well, it's a mathematical concept, it's a way of describing it, blah, 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 blah. But when I touch that wire in the wall, I get an electric shock and I can even die by it. I did not die because a concept struck me. Hopefully it was a physical object.
Right. So, saying to a physicist or somebody who's into the material objects that something is zero-dimensional is like saying to a mathematician that a rock is a number. It's just a transposition of object and concept without any particular value, right?
It's even worse. It's a location of the object, because what they're concerned about is where the object is located and how fast it's moving. It's looking at position, what they call position, and motion of this object. They're not talking about the object per se, because they say that that's philosophy. If you're trying to figure out what the correct architecture of light is, you're doing philosophy and not physics, according to the mathematicians. So they lost their track completely. I mean, I think the last people who dealt with the configuration of light were people like Fresnel and Hertz and Maxwell. And that was it. And after that, we forgot all about the architecture of light. Today, we deal with concepts. In fact, many mathematicians who are peer reviewers, they'll tell you right in your face that, they don't do classical physics anymore, by which they mean rational physics. They just do irrational stuff.
So if I understand your division, and I think that's clarified it for me, I appreciate that. If I understand your division then between science and technology, between physics and technology, would it be fair to say that better physics is occurring in the R&D labs of technology companies than it is in basically state-run campuses and other sort of government program physics institutions?
Well, let me just say that you don't want me ever to be a tyrant on Earth like Hitler or Mussolini, because I would drop the bomb on CERN and on SLAC. I think they need to be disintegrated together with the people who work there.
Well, I would say unfunded, not necessarily disintegrated, but I would agree with you that the funding, state funding for science is a wretched abomination in the face of rational physics.
Let me tell you what happened 2 days ago, and that'll give an answer to your question. This lady who's been following me for a while contacted me, and she wants me to give a presentation at the end of the month in Austria. Why did she call me? Because she is so sick of her politicians giving money to CERN in Switzerland. She wants to start a movement to stop the funding to all nuclear accelerator plants, to all these CERN, SLAC, whatever. They don't want Austria to contribute a single penny to CERN, and hopefully they get their way.
I agree. I think it's...
Yeah, I think this stuff is perfectly ghastly, and to me, if people are interested in this kind of conceptual, quote, science, mail them a check. I just don't see why it should be taken at gunpoint from the average taxpayer and handed over to a bunch of pencil necks who don't even have real jobs, my particular perspective.
Well, again, what have they done? They've smashed particles and they come up with new particles. Do we have a photograph of any of these particles? No. All we have is traces, according to them. These are traces, and